Alright, kids, buckle your seatbelts because we gonna be here for a while. This is map 6, Sanctuary by Nomad, and this is the area that exploded at the end of map 4 that suddenly has returned, as well as the railroad tracks at the beginning were from the end of map 5, so both the end of map 4 and map 5 come into play here. And then there's a door lift, which I found really funny the first time I played this map. Although, I will say that this map is a little bit nicer than, for how long it is anyway, than maybe some of the earlier maps, or it feels less like confrontational in the way that it's designed. Maybe that's my own personal perception. I feel like I have a tendency, especially lately because of, you know, feeling like someone who needs to be a serious game critic or something, to kind of try and universalize about what this experience is about and what to take from it, and I try to be as like comprehensive as possible. I try to like say as much as I can about like what I think that this thing is about and what it's trying to get across, so that I can sort of convince people that there's something really like worth looking at there. But I realize like it always feels like a little bit hollow to me, like personal experience kind of trumps everything else for me most of the time, and I wish I could like talk about that in a little bit more of a like honest way, or like just be a little bit more embracing of the subjectivity of this kinds of experiences. So I hope that like my perceptions of these maps aren't taken as like a universal truth, or like I'm trying to universalize about them, because I don't want to do that. I think like these things should be open to interpretation, and I don't want to like reduce them for people. As someone who like makes games myself, and like, you know, I've had people do criticism of my own games, and it's interesting, and like I like it to some degree, and then I also like feel like people don't get it, and I'm like really frustrated about certain things, or you know, I feel like it's kind of like reductive or something. And so yeah, I don't know, when you're talking about something that's really complex and like, you know, has lots of different facets to it, it's just like, it's really hard to even talk about it in a way that kind of makes sense, that it doesn't sound like really academic. And you know, I'm definitely worried about my videos coming off that way, or me using like words that kind of just like are fillers. But yeah, this like, I'm saying this partly because I think the beginning of this map's a little weak. You start off in this city area, and you go really like far up on that first room to the top of I guess some sort of building or something, and then you come all the way back down. And there's this first like initial like city, just like alley or something, and it's kind of like a setup for what's coming next. But it's a good time to talk about other things. Yeah, like this beginning is maybe what the fact that this map is more leisurely. It kind of takes a while to get going, and it has a different sort of progression than some of Asmail's maps, but it has a lot of the same very similar like narrative themes and kind of like surreal ideas and stuff. So you could potentially perceive this to be by the same person as like the first 6 maps, just because like of how like well they stick to a kind of like theme. But yeah, there's a moment with Barons here that's a little annoying. I didn't have too much trouble, partly because I played it on Hurt Me Plenty. I really like the switches in that room. There's a bunch of switches that don't necessarily work. I don't know if that's like reflecting some sort of narrative thing or not. It's hard for me to tell, honestly. But I like that like a lot of the details in A.L.T. like are there to be interpreted into, like that you can sort of come up with your own interpretation of like what that means as far as how it relates to the story. And it's like it wouldn't be too far off the, you know, like off track to kind of make that interpretation. It's just like it's already there, supported by like what's going on in the game. So, and I like that you can have that and also have like a game that's like fairly reasonably fun to play. Like I like this level maybe because it matches with some of my own like personal preferences, as far as it just kind of keeps warping you to new sorts of areas, and it brings a lot in at once. It does this thing that like I liked at the beginning and sort of other parts of Half-Life, where you know like you were stepping into the portal and then it would like warp you around to random places on like Zen or whatever. It was like a really brief like part of Half-Life, but I really liked that kind of interaction with this like more weird mystical fantasy universe, and this map really kind of takes that and does something with it, and it's a really good sort of story and plot transition, maybe one of the best in this WAD, from one area to the next, and it makes the first like I'd say really like 14 or 15 maps or so just feel really continuous, like one thing is going into the next thing, and you know like I'd say like it's not as successful in other parts of the WAD. Like some maps just like will just go into the next map and it feels like they were just kind of tacked on or whatever. So this isn't like perfectly successful or whatever, and there are some maps that I feel like bear the mark of it being kind of more of like a Russian community project where, you know, someone had maps to contribute so they just put them in. But I don't know much about like this guy Nomad's, I'm assuming it's a guy, I don't know, maybe. I don't know much about Nomad's other maps, but they have a map also in this WAD, like the next map, which is sort of like Dead Simple styled. Dead Simple is map 7 of Doom 2, where you, it's just like a small sort of arena style map, and the Dead Simple in A.L.T is like a little bit different. It's a bunch of like arachnotron spider demon dudes in these little cages, and then you fight like a whole bunch of demons. It's actually kind of neat, like in how it like it sort of uses that trope, but it does it in a way that's not like completely out of character for the rest of the WAD. Like it actually fits in with everything else. Here there's some really bizarre secrets. I don't know like where the other two secrets are, because the first like secret here, just getting it is it's like so involved, and there's like some tedious platforming, you know, which I forgive, because you have to make the most with what you have, and like Doom is not designed for platforming, but you also can like save at any moment at the very least, and that's something that you are always able to do in Doom. So if nothing else, and you know there's like id clip and whatever, of course you shouldn't use that, or you're not supposed to use that, but I don't know, like I award you know, I give points for people like trying something different, even if it's like frustrating, and I think frustration maybe goes well with this WAD anyway, even if it's like just like you know, getting a secret or something, it can be really frustrating. There's some other like tedious platforming stuff in other sections of the WAD, but I'd say like it mostly avoids it. Like there's a really tedious platforming part in like one of the secret levels, but that's a secret level, and then there's one part that's sort of optional, that's like in map 13. I'm trying to remember. There's probably more, but I'd have to play through all of it again. Like, I tend to go through and play specific maps that I really like from this WAD, but maybe don't necessarily, like, focus as much on playing the whole thing, which I think is maybe slightly unfair to it, because it's really best taken as one entire piece, and, you know, given what its ambitions and stuff are, like, I think that's the best way to appreciate it, so. But yeah, I don't know. I know everyone doesn't want to play a Doom mod, and hopefully I can like extract what some of what is interesting about it and like inspiring about it, even if like you're not necessarily interested in playing it or don't have the skill level or whatever. Because that's the whole point. It's like to kind of capture like a design idea or a concept that I think is interesting that I don't think a lot of people can easily really talk about, or that something like Doom captures well, like an idea in its design. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's the entire idea behind this series, is that hopefully it's not just something that you are watching because you like Doom or whatever, but it's something that you want to see like it capture like an idea or something that goes beyond just like the context of it being kind of fun shooter or whatever into, you know, like something more complete. And so yeah, I don't know. It's not like an ultra professional operation or anything, and I don't think I'm like doing the best job with these that I could. Like every time I make a video, I think about all the stuff that I could put in that I'm not putting in, or the ways that like I'm fucking up the commentary or whatever. But at least hopefully like you get something, and that's what's the important thing. I like this area, by the way, this big window. It's maybe signaling like that you're going into the next part of the map, and there's that big like guts pillar, which I really like. And I like going up that weird ladder thing that I just ran by. I'll have to go back up it at some point. But yeah, this map is just kind of like, it's enjoyable to me. There are some maybe difficult sections. There's a section at the end, like a big arena area, and you have to get a couple arch files, and then there's actually a spider mastermind at the end. But it's not so bad because you get a lot of like, you get 2 invulnerability spheres to use. I only end up using one of them, but you have the option to use them. I'm also playing on Hurt Me Plenty, so I like the more like, slightly more like leisurely difficulty, or at least the slightly challenging, but not like I have to be on my toes at all times kind of difficulty. Because when I'm playing something that's like narratively focused like this, and I'm recording a video and stuff like that, I don't want to die all the time. It's just really irritating. I already like feel bad every time that I have to like save in the middle of the level and I haven't had it like rehearsed. But when there's a level that's like this long, it's really like important to do that. Yeah, so here I'm picking up the red key, and I'll actually have to go back. I'll backtrack a little bit, which is maybe slightly annoying, but it'll help like set up the next part of the map. I like some of the lifts too. I like the weird pipe texture that they use as a lift often. But yeah, I think this map does a really good job of moving you out of the city maps, and I cheated and jumped there. I was trying to like demonstrate how that thing worked, and then I realized like, oh, you actually have to go back there once I get to the end of that like next hallway. But whatever. There's a weird, I use the word weird a lot, but if you play this one, you'll know why. Yeah, there's like a weird tech hallway. It makes me think of like the mixed themes of like Doom Episode 2, where it'd be like, you'd be in a hellish area and then you turn the hallway and there'd be like some ultra techy area. A lot of people really don't like that design, but that was one of the things that I always liked the most about Doom, is that it was just so unpredictable. You just turn a corner and you can be in a completely different feeling area. I think like the king of that, or queen, or whatever, is Episode 2, Map 7, Spawning Vats, which apparently has like a really weird history. Was one of the first Doom maps, maybe the first Doom map, I think. And then, like, there's an area in it that was like a test area that Tom Hall made, and then it just got sort of attached on to all this other stuff. I think like the map was mostly by Tom Hall. There might have been some areas that Sandy Peterson did stuff with. So it was like this bizarre combination of like warehouse, like tech base area, and these like weird hell areas. And I don't know, that's always, and it's like slightly non-linear too. The path through it and progression through it is really weird. A lot of people don't like the design of parts of Doom Episode 2, but I feel like whenever I can get to a mod that I just lowered that guts pillar, by the way. I like that the guts pillar is being used. And this outdoor area is, you know, where I start to really feel like the map hits its stride and starts doing interesting things. But yeah, whenever I play a mod or something that I feel like goes more off the feeling of like Doom Episode 2 or Episode 3, I get excited. Particularly Episode 2 though, because I just really like that mix of themes. I like that like really eclectic approach to design, and I feel like it's a really, I don't know, it was just like really exciting to me when I was like a kid and I would play it, and I like literally just not know what I was going to see next. There was just something so like unbelievable about it or something. And you know, when I played Doom 2, that a lot of that was kind of lost, because even though like some of the maps thematically and conceptually maybe were like a little bit stronger or a little bit more like consistent or something, like well, I wouldn't say Doom 2 is consistent, but like there's like one theme of the map and that's how it is. And I feel like people in the Doom community and stuff will criticize maps that are kind of all over the place, but I actually like that a lot of the time. That's honestly what I liked about the original Doom. So I mean, you can criticize it for not, you know, having a concept or whatever, but when that's like actually what's in the original game, it's kind of weird. I don't know. I was talking to my friend about how like there are certain like things that kind of unintentionally end up in these games that end up kind of getting like grandfathered in, like part of the Doom vocabulary. For example, like teleporters, I know Tom Hall added those in, like, and no one else wanted them. And then they just became like part of the Doom vocabulary that so many people use and take for granted. Same with like flying enemies and stuff. And then that was in Quake, and that's just something that people take for granted, but it was something that like individual person had to fight for a lot and was not ever considered like a given. And I don't know, there are a lot of things about Doom that I feel that sense about. Like some of the design and stuff, like you can tell that like no one was overseeing it, and that's good. Like, I mean, it can suck in that, like, you know, some of like Sandy Peterson's maps, for example, are a little rough and they have some unfortunate design decisions, but I really like that they exist at the same time, even if they're a little rough, because they do have like something going on in them. There's like an interesting idea, and it's like they try and like play with the design vocabulary a little bit. They don't feel generic, and so even when they feel like rough or like unpolished or whatever, they're at least like fit well with the rest of the game. And you know, that's the idea about like Doom and early PC games, like, which are basically like indie games or old games or whatever in their approach, because there's just more of an emphasis on trying to do things that feel like they work or feel kind of cool, but you don't necessarily have to explain why. And I don't really like the culture that says that you have to explain why every decision is in a game. I feel like indie game stuff, there's so much pressure to explain why something is significant, and it's like so bullshit to me. Like, this is a thing that I've been struggling a lot with lately about doing game criticism, how much you feel like you get sucked into the normal ways of thinking about something and talking about how it's like why this is important and like justifying it and stuff like that. And you kind of, the more that you do that, you get away from talking about what you actually want to talk about. And I felt so much pressure to just stay relevant within doing game stuff. And, you know, the more that I like do Doom maps or whatever, the more that I feel like no one gives a shit about what I have to say. But at the same time, like, I know that it's something I know about and I think it's important. And like, I don't know, like I get frustrated that I feel like the big personalities and the people who are like good communicators end up running the show, and that the people who I think are often like the most interesting designers and have the most to say like in the stuff that they make aren't the big speakers, you know, aren't the people who get invited to conferences to talk and stuff like that, just because they don't feel comfortable with it, or they're just not like as recognized in that culture. And I don't know, it's a real problem for me. I've been having lots of personal crisis about it, and saw somebody talking about it lately, and it's, I go to all these conferences and stuff, and I feel like a lot of people are really nice and everything, but I don't feel like I can really be critical of people's work and say like, I think you're missing out on like talking about what's actually interesting here, like. And a lot of indie stuff will go for like this feeling of like importance or whatever. It's like, oh, here's a serious narrative about suicide or whatever. But I feel like A.L.T or something like that is much more meaningful, because it's like, not only is it using the Doom's, like a game like Doom's mechanics in a very like sincere way, in a way that's like engaging in a gamey way, I guess you could say, in a way that's not like, doesn't fit like design or like whatever dogma that says like, if you design something like this, it has to be very on the surface about what it's communicating. It does it in a way that like is like true to like what's kind of fun about Doom and like what's interesting about it and respectful, but it also takes it further and it uses that to like communicate a story. And you look at like a lot of indie game stuff, and it'll try to do that story, and then it just won't be very engaging of a game. Like, it might have a perfectly interesting story, but it just isn't really doing much with it. And that's the thing, like, it's not about like the story that you're telling, it's about how you tell it. And that's why this is successful, because it tells it like interestingly. And that's why I'd like rather play like weird arty Doom mods that are, like maybe less ambitious in some ways. They don't make their own like lots of own graphics or whatever. They're using like an existing engine, but they're doing something way more like progressive and ambitious than like, these indie games that are getting like praised like a ton, and people don't pay attention to it because it's like, maybe because it's made by like Russian modders, or it's made by people, it's not sold, it's not commercial, it's not marketed. It's part of that sort of modding culture, and modding culture is really getting fucked over by Valve and like Bethesda and shit like that, where they're trying to make a profit off of it. And like, I don't know, like it just like the way that these like corporate like companies are trying to control the profits and like milk everything out of like small developers. It's just so disrespectful. And I think like it's just so like, I don't know. I'm just going on a rant about everything right now, but yeah, I like this area. This is presumably what the sanctuary part of the map is named after. And like I went here first, and then I went back into a teleporter, which I think was like optional, because there was an area where there was like very little combat that I was wandering through earlier. And I like that this has like, I posted it on my Twitter, but this has like cool like burned in shadows and stuff like that. I just really like this area. It feels nice, but it's not over detailed. There's some nice combat, but it's not like overwhelmingly hard. It's kind of like the kind of Doom stuff that I like. It has a good like pretty good engaging action, but it doesn't make you feel like you really fucked up if you die. Like, it's not super hard, but it's like it'll kind of mess you up, and it'll be challenging. And there's a lot of like kind of going to weird alternate settings and coming back and looping around and stuff, and I really like all those aspects of it, and that's why I think this map is like really cool in a lot of ways. I think the designer did a really good job with it. But yeah, I don't know, like I want games that are like fun, or at least engaging. They don't necessarily have to be fun, but also like I want like more narrative depth in games, and it can be really hard to like reconcile those two things. People have a hard time with it. It feels like you either go for one or the other, and that's just infuriating to me, because like I want something that like challenges me both on like a reflex or like, puzzle or whatever level, but also on like a emotional level. And there's just so little stuff that does that, and it's so like, as much as like indie stuff kind of markets itself as doing that, it doesn't do that. And you know, that's why. And like, I don't know, it's just the way that people sell stuff, like online on Steam and everything like that, like the way that shit gets marketed, like it's so about like the surface elements, because that's how you're supposed to sell it. And there's kind of sense, because there's so much like oversaturation of stuff, like you have to just sell it to this certain market in this like fairly conservative way, so this game can be like super arty in a few ways, but then like when you actually get down to it, there's not that much interesting going on, and there's just like sparse piano music and like someone talking very seriously over like a narrative or something like that. Or you have just like generic 8-bit pixel platformer that does like nothing with the formula aside from kind of looking cool. And like those are the things that, or like Minecraft clone or something, and it's just like I understand why people are so worn out by that stuff. And I see like an alternative in stuff like this, and I'm sad that like people won't pay attention to it because it's a fucking mod of an old game. It's not commercial, and it's by amateurs, you know? Like, I value amateurishness. Like, I certainly think that some degree of like professionalism maybe is important as far as like conveying your ideas in a way that like effectively or something. I don't even know if that's professionalism. I think that's just like being good at what you do. I don't know if that qualifies as being professional, because some of that shit is so arbitrary anyway, but like I like amateurishness and stuff. I wish like people would like actually embrace that, and there's like a lot of fear in that with indie stuff. Like if you look at like Ludum Dare or something, like yeah, there's a lot of shitty games, but there's also like kind of on display some of the raw elements of what's interesting about games. And you know, Doom maybe looks polished now just because of like there are a lot of people who are like kind of wizards working on it, but they made billions of games, and some of those old games that like id Software and Soft Disk and everything made were like not polished at all. Like there's a lot of like bullshit in it. Like, there's a lot of bullshit in Doom 2. Doom 2 is not very polished like level design at all, but they just kept making stuff, and because they kept making stuff, they made like some really interesting stuff that you wouldn't see otherwise. And just the fact that like through the design and stuff, people think that it's like that they have this perfect idea, or that they're gonna stake this claim out in this culture and like work on it for 5 years and just have this perfect encapsulation of it. It's like mostly bullshit. Like most people can't do that, and it's unreasonable to expect people to do that. And like we need to fucking talk honestly about that. I would rather see 100 people making like weird Doom mods or ZZT mods or like whatever. Like just do something like that's like, you know, that's like engaging you and is like actually fun, and like, you know, fun to make is what I mean. Like, I don't know, I feel like really emotional about this shit just because it's been so overwhelming to me. How many times can you say to someone like, this is what's important about this culture? Like, you like games because like you like engaging with them. You don't like games because like this idea that like games have to have this like bullshit cultural legitimacy, and it's exactly like contradictory to what actually gives games the legitimacy, by like trying to make them into like some sort of like film or literature kind of thing, in the most like fucking shallow way possible, that isn't respectful to the kind of gaminess of it, because we view that kind of action-y element as being like wrong. But it's so fucked up. It's like, I don't have problems with violence in games. I have problems with the way that like violence is used to like justify things. Like if you're being violent in a game, I like to know that it's there for like at least some sort of reason. And most games don't try and do that. Like the violence in Super Mario Brothers is pretty fucking disturbing, just like stomping on those Goombas when it's like supposed to be this like happy setting. That's like pretty disturbing to me, but like people don't talk about that shit, or if they do, it's like kind of a joke, you know. But yeah, I don't know. Here we're going back again to this like oh right, yeah, okay, there's this area which makes me think of some of the like weird tech-basy elements of E2M7 spawning bats, my favorite Doom map name. It's weird. It feels like kind of a beta map or something. There's like a little bit of a maze thing going on there. Although it's kind of a light maze. It's not, it doesn't do too much of it. It's just enough for like, get kind of a weird feeling in there, which I like. Like I said, this map puts you in a lot of different places, but it doesn't like expect you to like kind of linger in them frustratedly. It's pretty thoughtfully designed in that way, even if it doesn't have some of the like weird, bizarre highs of some of Azamale's stuff. And I really loved that spiral in the earlier area that I was talking about, but you can see it for yourself. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. I wish people would. I just want there to be a culture that is like more in line with what is actually like meaningful and interesting about games. And I mean I fucking like hate gamer culture too. Like I'm not like, you know, a lot of that stuff has shown itself to be really bankrupt, and we need to like have like criticism of that that's like, you know, talking about why it's like, you know, I don't like to use the word problematic, but disconcerting the way that things are made the way that they are, and we need to like be engaged with it, you know, directly with it, but also like I think like games have certain sets of tools that work well for games, and a game like Doom uses those tools really well. A game like Spelunky or whatever uses those tools really well. And so maybe like, oh, I love running away from these revenants here, and just goodbye. And they like you warp in like a weird shower thing, I don't know. There's like a lot of like real world type setting stuff in map 11, which is one of the more, maybe the most famous map of this whole set, and it has a lot of cool stuff in it, but I'm not as crazy about map 11 anymore. I get to fight an Archvile, and then a Spider Mastermind fairly soon. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have to like harp on this too much, but yeah, I really wish that like the culture that existed was different, and I feel like there's a lot of really bad signs that this shit is all just gonna fracture and fall apart, and I want it to be something else that it really isn't right now. And I know that there are people trying to make something else, but when you go to like conferences and stuff, you see like movies like Game Loading the movie and all that shit, like, or Indie Game the movie or whatever, like, well, at least like Game Loading tries to like make it more about, you know, a bunch of different people making stuff rather than like a few people making really successful games. But like, you see that stuff, and it's just, there's a kind of an idea of like what indie stuff is, and what like being a kind of ambitious or like artistically or like interesting game creator is about. And that's like, a lot of it is like bullshit and very limiting, and like a lot of it is actually kind of like disrespectful to the way that a lot of games work. And I wish that like we talk about that, and people still value this idea of professionalism, which I just don't give a shit about. Like, I always played mods when I was a kid. I always like was really interested in what people were making. That's what I liked, you know? And like, that's something that I've done since the beginning. I played Doom mods and Wolfenstein mods and like Mario levels since I was like fucking 11 or whatever, or 10. Like, that's something that I always did. So why is everyone so concerned about fucking professionalism? Like, I don't get it. And the professionalism, the idea of professionalism that they espouse is like often so empty. The more you value professionalism, the more that you kind of actually turn away from what is interesting, and you just look for this kind of like cultural, commercial legitimacy. And I feel like that's really destroyed the culture around games. It's something like Doom comes out, but then like the careers of people involved with it after never can really live up to it, because there was just this strange thing, and then they made it, and then they didn't have any space to do anything like, I don't know, just equally as strange or new, just because of the way that the culture works. I feel like so many feelings about that. I mean, I love like Anachronox and some other stuff, but I don't know. It is what it is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll probably come back with more videos on A.L.T later, but you got to see some of my ranting. So yeah, have a good, pleasant day.